is Uncollared, off-the-cuff conversations between progressive pastors at the intersection of religion, politics, and culture. I'm Todd Leonard. I'm senior pastor at Glendale City Church. In a moment, I'll be joined by Jonathan Stoner, an interfaith chaplain at City of Hope and a postulant to the priesthood of the Episcopal Church. Today, we conclude our three-part series on breaking free from fundamentalism by listening to Jonathan's story of his upbringing in fundamentalist Christianity and how he broke free from it and what his journey was like. I hope you enjoy his part of this conversation. All right, Jonathan, good to be with you and see you again. Last couple of weeks, it has just been Shane and I. So this week it's just you and I since Shane is away. And want to continue the conversation with you that Shane and I were doing about our upbringings in the Christian faith, our fundamentalist upbringings. And I know that you've also had that kind of upbringing. That's something that all three of us kind of have in common. And so we want to continue this conversation on breaking free from fundamentalism and what it was and what our journey was like that took us to a place where we feel like we've come to a more robust, a more generous Christian faith experience. And so anyway, so let's talk about that. Let's kind of hear your story. What was your upbringing like? What was your faith tradition that you were brought up in?
Well, it's good to be here, Todd. Yeah, for me, my upbringing was in the Baptist church, and it was a very fundamentalist Baptist church in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I was born. My grandparents on both sides of the family were fundamentalist Baptists, and my dad's parents were actually Baptist missionaries. And so my mom and dad met at the Baptist church where she was working as a children's ministries director. And then my dad was working as the janitor at the church because he was actually attending the local Baptist seminary. And so they met at the church, fell in love, got married, had, a bunch of kids, and I was the firstborn. And so anyways, I was born in, I was raised in a church that was, it was a church where they believed that they had the truth, and that there was this insider-outsider dichotomy where we were the insiders, we were the ones who were saved, we were the ones who were going to heaven. And even we were suspicious even of like folks in other Christian denominations, because they weren't Baptist, and so they didn't have the same theology as we did. And so we worried that they might be in error and that they might actually be headed to eternal destruction or eternal damnation because of their heretical or sketchy beliefs or doctrines or dogmas. And I think, as a young person, growing up within that system, that religious system, I think I kind of unquestioningly accepted a lot of what I had been handed, in terms of my grandparents, my parents, pastors at church, in terms of like in Sunday school. I kind of just trusted the authority figures, and I basically thought, okay, this is the truth. This is what, what I need to believe to be saved. And I think, when you're holding out eternal life with Jesus and the saints and all your family members versus eternity in a lake of fire with the devil and all his angels, you're like, okay, of course I'm going to choose door, door A, door B. I'm going to go through door A. And
pretty clear choice.
Yeah. So I think it wasn't until I got older where I was when I was like 17, 18, I joined Youth with a Mission, and
Hmm.
this was right after high school. And I started traveling to other countries and interacting with Christians from different denominations, and also interacting with people who were from different religions, and even people who didn't have any kind of a faith tradition that was
Hmm.
necessarily important to them. And I think I started meeting like really deeply moral, beautiful, lovely, virtuous people who were adherents of other faith traditions or part of other Christian denominations, who firmly believed that their belief system was right and true and good.
Hmm.
And I thought, wow, here I'm encountering, like, for instance, I was I think, I forget, it was my late teens, early 20s. I had met a Mormon girl who um, I became really good friends with, and then we ended up dating. And I remember meeting her family and just thinking, wow, like, our families are so similar, like in
Hmm.
terms of our beliefs, values, in terms of our approaches to moral issues, in terms of our approaches to ethical issues, in terms of even the way that we pray, the way that we talk about our faith.
Hmm.
There were clear differences as well, but there was so much overlap, and you know, I, I just saw so much. I saw so much that was attractive in the way that they
Yeah.
lived their lives, and I thought,
Yep.
well, who am I to write them off and to say that um, they're doomed or damned
Hmm.
because they've accepted the Book of Mormon, which
Right.
I've been taught is heretical or
Right.
not true. And so I just started. I think it just expanded from there. I started to meet Catholic friends who were very similar kind of a situation. Then I met Muslim folks, and I met Jewish friends, and it was like each time I met someone of a different denomination or faith tradition who we were still so much alike in terms of our beliefs and our values, I just started to question this whole idea of insiders versus outsiders.
Hmm.
And that whole black and white dichotomy started to crumble a little bit. And I started to kind of wonder what it meant to be saved and what it meant to be a part of God's kingdom, or to be or even like to even question like what happens after we die and things like that,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
um and just to question a lot of the things that I just assumed were true because I had been told they were true, as a
Right.
child. So yeah.
How was that for you? For me, that there was kind of that place where initially, coming to the place of saying, "Oh, there's this commonality I share with so many different types of people," but then it also, for me, comes to this place of an identity crisis, not just from the specific uh, sect of my Christian faith, which was Seventh Day Adventism, but even my Christian faith as a whole, of saying, what is where do I really fit within that? And that, for me, that became a kind of an existential questioning of what is my identity, um, when I find so much good in all these different religious traditions, or in people of no religious tradition. It became for me this unmooring, and I don't know what that was like for you along that path.
Yeah, I mean, very similar. I mean, you know my parents ended up leaving the Baptist church when I was 9 or 10 years old because of their own growth and their own spiritual journey that they were on. They had been exposed to, I think at the time in the 80s, it was called the third wave, or like the charismatic
Mm.
movement that had come
Hmm.
out of the vineyard, and like John Wimber. And
Right.
I remember them watching videos from the vineyard, and having these kind of charismatic experiences that I was observing as a child. And then we started attending vineyard churches. And then after being in the vineyard for a while, we started going to non-denominational Christian churches that were kind of more charismatic leaning. And then we were in the Assemblies of God churches for a while. And then, then I went out when I was in YWAM, it was kind of a mishmash of a lot of different things.
Hmm.
And then when I left YWAM, or Youth with a Mission, I came back to my hometown of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and some of my closest friends that I was working with at the time, I was doing, I think I was painting houses, and the guy that ran this company was Catholic, and I remember he and I having these really, they were debates, but they were also kind of like heart to hearts about our faith, and I think I just became very curious about Catholicism and very curious about Christian history and kind of, am I a Protestant just because I was brought up that way, or
Hmm.
like, and I kind of wanted just to get back to the historic Christian faith. And so I spent
Yep.
some years in the Catholic Church and in the Orthodox
Hmm.
churches, and then here, fast forward to today, where I'm in the Episcopal Church, and I'm an interfaith chaplain. And I think for me, my
You've moved
God,
around a lot. You
I have
definitely you've been what would yeah, you're definitely been a religious explorer. Uh,
absolutely. And I think that for me, it was my God box keeps getting
mm,
expanded. It keeps whatever I think is. It's like I remember one of our pastors from a church that I went to years ago. He's become kind of a more progressive, I guess, Christian, so to speak, and he had become a part of the emergent church. And
mhm,
I remember him saying something about um, uh, just like being uncertain of certainty, or like
mm,
something along
mhm,
those lines of just the only thing that we can know for sure is that whenever we're certain about something, that we should maybe not be so certain about that,
right.
because our minds might change, or we might find out some new information that changes the way that we perceive
Yeah.
whatever we think is so 100% true,
Right.
unquestionably true. And so I think I just learned to carry a lot of those things more gently and loosely. And I think it was thankfully there was a mentor I had in my mid 20s who is a Christian man, a Christian businessman, and he is kind of a mentor to a lot of young men. And he actually comes from a more conservative Christian stream, but his whole focus is on introducing people to the person of Jesus,
Mhm,
introducing people to the writings about Jesus,
mhm,
and basically um, helping them or discipling them so that they can be the best Jesus follower within whatever tradition they
mm,
subscribe to. And that was kind of mind blowing for me at the time, of just thinking, oh wow, like here's somebody who believes that it's really about this journey with Jesus, regardless of whatever denomination or maybe even faith tradition that
mm,
you were brought up in. And he's not trying to like get you to join his denomination. He's saying, no, I just want you to experience the person of Jesus, to learn about him, and then to become a disciple of Jesus and to follow
mm,
him, because I think that path is the best path in life. And
mhm,
then after that encounter with that mentor, there was a missionary who I went to hear speak years ago, who talked about doing something similar in the Muslim world or in the Arab world, where his focus wasn't on converting Muslims out of Islam to Christianity. It was introducing the person of Jesus to Muslims, and then
mhm,
for them, even as Muslims, to become Jesus followers while still having
mm,
a Muslim
mhm,
cultural and religious identity. And
mhm,
that was also mind blowing for me, where I was like, oh, but also that kind of, I like that, because I think that this idea of, like, I think that Jesus can have disciples from a wide range of,
yeah.
walks of life and cultural backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds and religious backgrounds. So that kind of made sense to me. And then I think I
Yeah.
was prepared to accept that, oh yeah, that seems legitimate to me, that could be a way of sharing the faith without necessarily being so adamant about making converts to our particular
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
denomination or our
Right.
particular understanding of Christianity. So
Hmm.
I don't know, that's helped me a lot along my journey.
And so, what has it been for you now that your whole journey makes a lot of sense for me that you would end up in a role of chaplaincy because the role of chaplaincy does get. I mean, you do need to have the temperament and the skill set, obviously, to be a caregiver in that role. But the beauty of chaplaincy is you do get to interact with people from a wide variety of faith traditions. Where it seems like to me that seems to be a perfect fit for what your journey has been. Would you say that's been true for you as far as you've now been entering into chaplaincy here for the last few years?
Yeah, and I would say that for me, you know, I think I think how I've probably evolved or shifted has been to really embrace that identity of an interfaith chaplain, where I myself come from a Christian faith background, and I still kind of hold to a Christian framework, I think, in the way that
Mm-hmm.
I approach the world. But the idea of being a Jesus follower who day to day, week to week, identifies as Catholic, Buddhist, Episcopal, sometimes atheist, sometimes agnostic,
Yeah.
but yet keeps coming back to the person of Jesus, despite my doubts, despite my questions, despite the challenges of life or the things in life that I can't explain or don't have answers
Mm-hmm.
for. I still come back to the stories of Jesus, and I still come back
Mm-hmm.
to the parables of Jesus that I think are timeless and that I think
Mm-hmm.
continue to help me in my journey of life and in my journey of faith. And actually, I think the parables of Jesus are stories that I've been able to share with people from a wide variety of faith traditions that they've found those stories really meaningful to them,
Hmm.
and that have helped them in their own journeys of life. So I don't, when I was younger, I was taught that I was kind of meant to go out into the world and to make converts and to preach and to um, share the gospel, preach the gospel, and to win souls for Christ. And I think as over the last 30 years of unlearning and relearning and
Hmm.
deconstructing and reconstructing and all, this whole
Right.
process that seems never ending, I think I've really become more and more comfortable with the idea that God is at work in my life. God is at work
Hmm.
in the lives of other people. And I get to be a vessel. But I also think that so many times, God is more interested in me growing and evolving as a person, as a human being, than he is in me preaching whatever my truth is to someone else who might see the world differently from me,
Hmm.
um, and trying to get them to see things exactly as I see them. And I
Hmm.
think the more that I surrender control when it comes to these encounters, whether it be a spiritual care consult in the hospital or whether it be a conversation with someone at a bar after a concert or a comedy show or something, the more I let go of control and let go of my own agenda and just really be present to them and approach them with curiosity, with humility, with compassion, and with a teachable heart, and just believing that God is present. He is working in me, He is working in them before we even met each other, that I can just be present and be a witness to what God is already doing in that person's life, and then be there to validate, to affirm, to um, to be curious, to be excited about
Hmm.
their journey of life, their hopes, their dreams, their fears, whatever they're praying for, whatever they're hoping for. And it's really freed me up to have interactions with other human beings that aren't, that don't feel like I'm, you know, like the analogy that comes to mind is I've had friends that work in sales, and you know how when you're with a salesperson and you just feel like this anxiousness of like, they're trying to sell me, they're trying to they're trying to get me to buy something.
Right.
I think, as at least in the kind of Christian tradition I was brought up in, we were almost trained to be salespeople.
Yeah.
And that rubs almost everybody the wrong way. I know sometimes it works out and we make a sale here and there, but by and large, that approach to life of being salespeople, I don't think that's the kind of person I want to be. And I don't even think a lot of the people who were raised to be that way ever feel completely comfortable with that,
Right.
Unless maybe you're Billy Graham or something. But like, I just, that whole approach to life of trying to sell people on Jesus or Christianity, that's not for me. And I think the fact that I've been able to jettison that or to kind of let go of that and embrace this new way of being a Christian or being a Jesus follower has been so freeing for me. And I don't have the kind of paralyzing, crippling anxiety that I used to have when it comes to worries about my own salvation or worries about fears about other people and their eternal destiny. And I think, if I could go back to the parables of Jesus that I mentioned earlier, for me, the most helpful parable in the Bible, in the New Testament, is the parable of the prodigal son. And I think that I go back to that parable on a daily, if not weekly basis of when I think of what God is like or what the divine is like or a higher power, I think of that story and I think of that conception of God that Jesus painted for us. And I think of that God approaching, running towards each patient, each family member that I encounter, each caregiver that I encounter. And I think that's what God's heart is for that person, because I think that that's what Jesus revealed to us, is that's what God is like, and that's what his heart is like. And so then when I can live into that, when I can trust in that, when I can hold on to that picture of love, of impossible, beautiful, almost like too good to be true kind of love of a father for all of his children, or love of a mother for all of her children, just that parental love that is just so, that we all kind of long for, I think. When I can believe that there is a God that exists, that loves me and that loves my patients and that loves my fellow caregivers and that loves all of our family members with the love that's displayed in that kind of story, that unconditional love, that gives me a lot of hope for myself and for humanity when it comes to this divine being that wants to interact with us and wants to participate in our lives and wants to lead us into whatever abundant life looks like, not only here, but in the life to come.
Thanks for listening. We'd love to get your feedback on this episode. Please email us at uncollarpodcast@gmail.com. You can find Uncollared Podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. You can watch the podcast on YouTube. And please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.